Kraven the Hunter isn't just bad, it's quite frankly horrible. And to be honest, it pains me to say that. It is unfortunate because I wanted this movie to be good, but sadly, that is just not the case. So I know I'm a bit late in talking about this movie and everyone's been saying it's horrible. I mean, it has a 17% critic score on Rotten Tomatoes. It's been a financial disaster in the box office, and one of my best friends told me I'd be better off watching The Marvels again, and that is a form of torture that I do not think is mentally conceivable. So I didn't want to make this video because I genuinely didn't want to waste my time watching this movie. But later, I decided to just take the L and give it a go anyway, and after actually watching the movie, it is crazy to me how the producers of this movie let this happen again, because the exact same thing happened before, literally in the same year. And to be honest, I think this is part of a bigger problem in Hollywood, and I think this Kraven disaster may finally solve it, and that is why I want to talk about it. To be fair, I was hoping this movie would be good. I mean, I watched the trailer and it was pretty good. And it does have some interesting action sequences in the film. They've also got some good actors on it too. We got the likes of Russell Crowe and Aaron Taylor-Jackson, Ariana DeBose, you know, good actors. But as we all know, good actors doesn't equal a good movie, as we've seen numerous times, and it most certainly doesn't equal good characters, because what on earth are the characters in this movie? The thing is, usually bad CGI or not a big enough budget can be compensated for by compelling characters and a tight narrative. The characters in a movie are an integral part of it. People are more likely to remember a character than a flashy action sequence or a witty one-liner, and some of the best movies in cinema history have also given us some of the best characters with strong motivations, and characters that even years after the movie has aired, you still remember them. So it begs the question, are we gonna remember the characters in Kraven the Hunter 5 years from now? I'll answer it for you. No, I don't think so. Where do I even start? I think when they were trying to write the characters, they just had like a round table, like a brain dump session, and they were just like, how can we craft the most basic, generic, dry-ass characters ever known to man? And they just started firing away. Okay, that is a bit of an over-exaggeration, but it genuinely feels like that's what happened, because I don't even know how the script for some of these characters was even written. A perfect example of this would be the Rhino character. You know, the mafia gang leader that turns into an actual rhino. You know, of all the antagonists I've ever seen, that guy has to be in my top 2 of most horrible antagonists, and believe me, I've seen a lot of pretty bad ones, partly thanks to Sony. The guy had basically zero characterization, so we had literally no reason to care about him. He wasn't funny, witty, serious, or even dangerous, so I don't even know what he was, and most importantly, he wasn't even a real threat. He never was. The only reason is after Kraven, the protagonist, is because he knows he's gonna get clapped if the guy comes for him first. So if you're not even a reasonable threat to our protagonist, what the hell are you supposed to be exactly? It was hilarious just watching this character on screen, because this character alone is enough to make this movie bad, but crazily enough, they somehow managed to create even more antagonists that are even more useless. We see this guy who somehow has the ability to pause time, or at least create that illusion of pausing time, which to be honest is actually quite threatening, because that is an overpowered ability, especially against someone with Kraven's skill set. That said, we get literally no background on him whatsoever, other than the fact that he's obsessed with Kraven, which I can understand. I mean, look at that body. But other than that, he's just a complete mystery, and no one knows why he even has that kind of overpowered ability, which is also like a theme in this movie, people just having abilities outside the natural scope of physics and nature with no explanation other than I went to see a doctor. But maybe the guy did actually get his powers of literally pausing time through a medical procedure, in which case I hope the doctor responsible can do something about cancer next. Anyway, the guy, much like the other antagonist, has no trait going for him. He's not funny, relatable, witty. The only thing about him is that he's the only one who actually stands a chance against Kraven. So he's the only semblance of an actual threat in this movie. And it's not just the antagonists, even the protagonists were pretty boring. And not not just boring, we the viewers couldn't connect with them, even despite dedicating what felt like an hour to their backstory. I think that's another problem with the movie though. A significant portion of the runtime was dedicated to the protagonist's backstory, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. A good backstory adds depth to a character. The problem is that the story fast forwards 16 years later, and then the characters don't have that much going for them in the current time. They're just like shadows of themselves 16 years ago. So essentially their old selves had nuance, but their current selves don't, if that makes sense. And this is especially true for a character called Dimitri, Kraven's brother. It would have been nice to see more about him, his day-to-day life, his inner struggles, some of his friends perhaps. What job does he do? This kind of character development is crucial if you're going to get people invested in a character. But we got none of that for none of the characters. Not a single character in this movie was properly developed, despite it being over 2 hours, which is just unbelievable now that I think about it. So we've got horrible antagonists coupled with protagonists nobody cares about, and the result is a shit show. That's what you get. And as you can imagine, this just naturally leads to another problem, which is that the stakes in this movie were just non-existent. Like, I am being for real with you right now, not a single cell in my body moved while I was watching this movie. I felt literally nothing. It's like when you've had a rough day at work and you just pull on a Netflix movie just so you can fall asleep. I like to call them sleep movies or snooze movies. It's interchangeable. You would probably not believe me if I told you I legitimately dozed off while watching this movie, but it did happen. And it was kind of funny. This movie has such low stakes and characters you're not even interested in, it's kind of hard to sit through its entire runtime. Like right through the 2 hours, you will inevitably get bored at some point. And the producers might want to attribute that to some kind of TikTok brain phenomenon, but frankly, that's part of the problem. Not even acknowledging that your movie is so horrible that people can't physically sit through the entire runtime. Instead, they opt to put the blame on consumers, because that's the smart thing to do. And you know, I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say Kraven the Hunter's utter disaster isn't just because the movie's bad, although that's a big part of it. Obviously, there are other things at play here, one of which is just a lack of trust for the production company. As many of you would probably know, Sony's Spidey Marvel universe hasn't gotten the best rep in the last few years. In other words, it's been a shit show. It's just been flop after flop, and truthfully, I think it's part of a bigger problem. The first movie to come out was Venom in 2018, and while the movie wasn't the best movie, frankly it wasn't much of a good movie either, however it was still entertaining. It had that going for it. And that's still a common theme amongst all the Venom movies. They're not the most thematic movies or the movies with the most intriguing plot lines and characters, but they are fun to watch. And I guess if you can give viewers just that, it's enough. Sometimes. Not all the time, but sometimes it can work. After Venom 1 and Venom 2, I reckon the executives at Sony Studios were thrilled at how people received the movies, even though they didn't have that much substance to them. So they decided to dangle their legs in the water a bit more and see just how far they could take this. So they came out with Morbius, and that flopped hard, with a 15% Rotten Tomatoes and a 5.1 IMDb. The movie was not received well and made over $167 million on a budget of $75 mil. Now they claim they made a profit, but me and you both know they probably spent $100 mil on advertising. So that movie was a flop, but they decided, hey, let's just make another one using the same retarded formula. Maybe that one will work. After all, it's worked before. And so they decided to come out with Madam Web, possibly the worst movie of the decade. The movie's pretty bad, and that movie tanked. And not only did it tank, it lost over $250 million according to reports. And you know what's funny? I generally think that movie is worse than Kraven. I mean, Kraven the Hunter is bad, but that movie is unbearable to watch. Like, physically and literally. But because the Sony Spideyverse has things like Madam Web in its lineup, it's not hard to see why someone would not want to subject themselves to that kind of torture again, and not even give this movie a chance. And this is even bigger than Sony. This is a problem with the entire superhero movie franchise. People keep saying that movie critics and reviewers are becoming too critical of superhero movies. But first of all, that's been the case since like forever. Movies like Thor and The Hulk got bad reviews from critics. Doesn't mean the audiences didn't like it. And since when has critic opinion actually changed public opinion? There's cases over and over again when critics diss a movie, but the audience eats it up like they're the best fries in the world. And we can't say superhero fatigue because people do still in fact like superhero movies. Just ask Deadpool vs. Wolverine. The hype for that type of stuff is very much still there. Honestly, at the root of it, it just comes down to whether a movie is good from a storytelling point of view, or is it entertaining at the very least. Deadpool vs. Wolverine didn't have the best storytelling, but people loved it anyway, because the characters were fun and entertaining, and they rode on the nostalgic train of the old Marvel heroes, much like the way Spider-Man No Way Home did. Kraven the Hunter is going to be the last installment of the Sony Spideyverse, and the only thing I can say to that is thank God. Another one of those movies, and I'd be scared that Sony wouldn't have enough money left to do the movies that actually mattered, like Spider-Man Beyond the Spider-Verse, which we've been waiting for ages now. And it's also a good thing because now the producers know that the audiences aren't just num-nums who are going to eat the low effort, low budget, AI scripted movies they've set to roll out in droves. And now they know if they don't want to lose any more money, they'd better start making well thought out, fully fleshed movies and characters like they used to, because that's really all we're asking for here. Anyway, what did you think of Kraven the Hunter? Was it absolutely horrible, or did you genuinely like the movie? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and if you like this video, subscribe so you can hear me rant, or hopefully not rant, about more stuff. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.